Resourceful Designer, episode 203, Selling Design Services.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. He thinks greeting cards are a waste of money. Mark Descout.
Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're a longtime listener, I'd like to thank you for your return visit. And if this is your first time tuning into the podcast, welcome. I hope you get some value from it. And if you do, you can check out the previous 202 episodes I've put out, all about helping you run a home-based or freelance graphic design business. Now, in this episode, I'm going to share the basics when it comes to successfully selling your design services. And I'm going to share a tip of the week for better discoverability by Google. Now, I like to start off every episode with a little bit of what I've been up to. And this past week, I did complete one client website. I finished it and got it launched. And I made some pretty good progress on another one that should be completed very soon. And I got an order to work on another site, but I haven't started that one yet. And I did work on a couple of podcast cover arts. One of them is finished. The other one I'm doing some revisions on. And here, get this. I submitted 4 proofs to the woman. I said I'd give 2 to 3, but I ended up supplying 4 proofs to her just because I was having fun creating it. And this is the response I got back from her. She says, I posted the podcast cover proofs you provided to my Facebook group. I figure since they are my target audience, they will know what is best for my cover art. Here are the comments they left. Please see what you can do. Ugh. Can you imagine the headache that is? She gave me a list of comments, a lot of them contradictory, from the people in her Facebook group. People who have no idea about the scope of what she's doing. This is a brand new podcast she's starting. They just look at it and that's all they're seeing is her image. Like they're talking about things like, oh, I don't like the shirt you're wearing, or your smile, you could be smiling more. And some people saying, oh, you should be smiling less. And anyways, what a headache. So I've got to get back to her and say, listen, it's not your clients that get to decide this. It's you after we discuss things, and I have to educate her a little bit on what is going to happen going forward before I make any revisions to her cover art. But it doesn't matter how long you've been in business. That's the sort of thing we've got to deal with. So that's a little bit of what I've been up to. Now, I have been spending a lot of time in the Resourceful Designer community. Lots of great conversations in there. Some people sharing their successes, some people having issues that we're all helping out with. Some great new resources being shared. Some of them I'm testing out, and if I like them, I may share them on the podcast in the future. And just overall, we're having a great time getting to know each other and helping each other out. The Resourceful Designer community has quickly become my favorite place to interact with other designers. And I would love for you to be one of those designers. You're interested in joining a great community of devoted designers who want to grow their business and help each other out, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/community and join. And now, this week's tip of the week. And this week's tip has to do with Google My Business. Now, this is useful for both you and your clients if you design websites. And that is that Google My Business, first of all, it's a very desirable place to show up. When somebody does a Google search for whatever business, if you're a dentist, a plumber, a carpet layer, a lawn care maintenance, or a graphic designer, whenever somebody does a Google search, one of the most visible results is the Google My Business section that usually lists 2 or 3 different businesses along with a little pin on a map showing you where they are. And those businesses usually get the most traction. So whether that's you or your clients, the idea is you want to show up in that list. Well, one thing that you need to do in order to make sure that your business does show up at the top of that Google My Business list in the searches is to make sure that the address that is listed in the Google My Business is identical to the address you have on your website. When Google compares the two, it knows that you're linking to a website, but if it looks at the two and it doesn't see the identical address, it kind of doesn't give it as much search juice, if you want to call it that, and it won't rank as high in the rankings. And what I mean by this is if on your website, your address is 123 North Main Street, and if you spell out the word north and the word street, then it better be the exact same thing on Google My Business. Because if on Google My Business you put n.main and then st. and it's not the same as on your website, Google will penalize you. So that's a very easy fix to do for both you and your clients. Anytime I build a website for a client, I ask them if they're already in Google. If they're not, then I can help them with that submission, let them do it and just guide them along the way. But if they are, I will go into that and find out exactly what address they have listed in the Google My Business and make sure I copy it identically on their website. Because Google will see the two, and if they're a perfect match, it'll give a little extra boost to that business in the search rankings. So that's this week's tip of the week. Just make sure that the addresses are exactly the same the way they're written and spelled. And now, selling design services. A couple of episodes ago, I asked you to fill out a survey of what you liked, what you didn't like, and what you'd like to see different about the Resourceful Designer podcast. Now, a common theme amongst the replies was the desire to hear more information on selling design services to clients. And that actually gave me several ideas that I'll tackle in future episodes of the podcast, such as how to explain the value of design to a client. But today, I want to talk about the basics of selling, a selling 101, if you will. Now, newcomers to the freelance life often believe that the success of a home-based graphic or web design business lives or dies with your design skills. Although partially true, after all, if you're not a good designer, you're going to have a hard time being successful on your own. But the truth of the matter is that how good of a designer you are actually comes second to how good of a salesperson you are. Because if you cannot sell, you might as well give up your freelance dreams, go get hired somewhere where all you do all day is design and somebody else handles the selling part. And there's nothing wrong with that. There are many designers who spend their entire career working for someone else, and they're happy doing so. I'm the first one to admit that running a home-based design business is not for everyone. However, if you do want to give it a go, you better feel comfortable selling, because your business will depend on your skills as a salesperson more so than your skills as a designer. Have you ever heard the saying, good marketing can sell a bad product, but bad marketing cannot sell a good product? The same applies to home-based or freelance design businesses. If you're good at selling, a mediocre designer can make a living as a freelancer. However, an amazing designer that's not good at selling will have a difficult time staying afloat. So how do you become a good seller? Well, like everything else, it comes with practice and experience. Although, being a people person does help. But let me break it down. First of all, you need to get the notion out of your head that selling is about making a sale, because it's not. And the sooner you realize that, the better you'll get at sales. Selling is not about the exchange of money. It's about giving a client relief and lowering their anxiety when it comes to spending their own money. Clients come to you because they need something. It's that quote-unquote problem that you always hear we designers have to provide a solution for. However, even though the client realizes they need something, they feel reluctant to part with their hard-earned money to get whatever that is. Now, if you can put them at ease with that notion and make them realize what exactly their money is buying them, they'll be much more willing to spend what is necessary. But how do you put a client at ease when it comes to spending money? The core principle of successful selling is making the client feel cared for and appreciated. When someone feels cared for and appreciated, they let their guard down, they open up, and they become much more responsive to whatever ideas you present them. If you offer a solution to a client's current problem and you make them feel cared for and appreciated in the process, it becomes much easier for you to lead the client through the entire sales process to the end. So let's break down this sales process into its most basic components. I'd like you to think of the sales process as a video game. Whether you're a gamer or not, you probably understand this analogy. In a video game, you can't just turn it on, jump to the very last level, and expect to win the game. Video games are built so that every level along the way equips you and better prepares you for that final level victory. It's the same for the selling process. You can't win over a client by jumping to the final level. And that final level, by the way, is the price. Before you ever discuss price, you need to lead the client through the various levels of the sales process. Think of these levels as objection points, obstacles that you need to overcome before moving on to the next level of the quote-unquote video game sales process. So the first level that you need to get by is trust. If you cannot get a client to trust you, there's no point moving forward because you'll never make the sale. Think about it. What was the last thing you purchased from someone you did not trust? I personally can't think of anything myself. However, I can think of several things I did not purchase because I didn't fully trust the person doing the selling. It's the stereotypical used car salesman. No matter how much they smile and say the right things, you always wonder what they're not telling you. So the first level of the sales process is getting the client to trust you. But how do you do that? There are many, many ways to get someone to trust you, and a lot of them are developed over time. But sometimes your sales process might be a 10-minute phone call, and that's it. So how do you get somebody to trust you in a very short amount of time? Well, here are the two most important factors, especially if you're pressed for time, like on a phone call or something. Number one, listen more, talk less. Trust is about focusing on what is important to the client and less on what is important to you. To you, the sales is important. To the client, everything else is. And if they think that the sales is not as important to you as it is, they'll be much more inclined to carry on. If you can prove to the client that you care about their concerns and that you genuinely want to help them, they'll trust you more. And point number two is to address their pain points. Clients come to you with one thing in mind. They want a logo, they want a website, they want a poster. But that one thing may be their idea of a fix for many different problems they're currently facing. Client may say they want a website to promote and sell their services, but there's sure to be some underlying issues they may not be talking about. Things like maybe a lack of brand awareness for their services, increased competition. Maybe they've gotten some negative publicity that they need to overcome. Maybe what they're doing now is not having the conversion rates they expect, and their sales are dwindling. Whatever the issues are, you need to try to pinpoint them. It's more than just building a website. It's finding solutions to all these things. So as you're listening, try to pinpoint their various pain points and be sure to acknowledge and comment on them. Let them know you understand. The client will appreciate the added attention and quickly realize that you care about them and not just the sale. So once you've established some trust, it's time to move on to the second level. And that's to see if partnering with this client is actually a good fit. Just because you've helped other clients with similar problems in the past doesn't mean that you are the right person for this particular client right now, or that this client is the right person for you. This whole process, this second part, continues the trust building process. Tell the client that before you proceed any further, you need to see if you are the right people to work together to solve their problem. Ask them questions. Do a mini discovery meeting. Of course, if you get the project, you're going to want to go into much more questions, but now you're just trying to determine if you're a good fit to work together. So ask them questions. Learn about them and their business. Find out what results they are expecting from you and from whatever they are asking of you. And ask them, how would they deem the project successful? That's always a great question to ask. Another great question to ask them is, what would prevent them from seeing the results they expect, especially if you provide them exactly what they're asking for? Now, that's a sort of question that forces the client to look internally. They start wondering, what if you design the perfect logo for them, the perfect website, the perfect poster, and yet they still don't see the expected results? Now they have to think internally and try to process that. And asking questions like this shows them that you care and you're more interested in their success than you are about making the sale. Asking questions like these will help you both determine if you're a good fit to work together. And if you can show them that you are a good fit, they'll be much more open to whatever you propose going forward. And that brings us to level 3 and beyond. Now, this is where things get a bit more difficult for me to explain. Once trust is established by showing the client you care for and appreciate them, and you've proven that you're a good fit to work together, then it's time to start diving in and discussing the project itself. Up until this point, your conversation was mostly about the client, about their business, with a very little bit of what services you can offer thrown into the conversation. And if done correctly, you should now find it much easier to discuss the design project with them because you've established that level of trust and a connection with the client through levels 1 and 2 of the sales process. Your job now is to lead the client through whatever other quote-unquote objections they may have regarding their project and putting them at ease for each one. Now, because every client and every design project is different, I can't really guide you through these levels. If you want to stick to the video game analogy, there are no cheat codes when it comes to this part in discussing the project. But by openly listening to your client, determining their pain points and their concerns, you should be able to address any objections they may have as you discuss how you can help them achieve their desired goals. And once you've addressed their objections and everyone is satisfied, it's time to move on to the final level, and that's price. And this is the level where the whole video game analogy falls apart because unlike a video game, this final level is actually the easiest. By this point, the client should be fully engaged and ready to work with you. They've developed trust in you through conversation. They know you understand their situation. They believe you have the solution to their problem. They know you care for them and have their best interest at heart. And all of this leads them to view you as an asset, a wise investment. Price is now just a formality. And when you quote them something reasonable, even if it's more than they initially thought to spend, they won't hesitate to accept because you've shown them the value of your partnership. And that's the power of the sales process. So what have we learned? People have been conditioned for generations to not trust salespeople. So the trick to good selling is to not sound like you're selling. If you can establish yourself as an asset to the client, an investment and not just an expense, you'll have a much higher chance of closing the sale. I read a quote in an article while I was researching today's topic, and I'd like to share it here. The quote is, "Sales is leading people to a solution favorable to you via a solution that is favorable to them." And what that translates to is a successful sale is a win for both parties involved. So you complete the sale by building trust and showing the client that you appreciate and care for them and their success, and they return the favor by accepting the price you present them. Now, as an added bonus, when done properly, these selling tips can also help you transition to value-based pricing if you're not already using that strategy. Now, if you're not sure what value-based pricing is, listen to episode 11 of the podcast, which is Pricing Strategies for Your Graphic Design Business, and episode 110, Value-Based Pricing, How to Do It Right. But it works because the client will definitely see the value in hiring you and will be willing to pay for that investment. Now, I would love to know, what does your sales process look like? Let me know by leaving a comment for this episode at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 103. Now, I did have a question last week, but alas, no more questions to share with you on the podcast this week. If you have a question you would like me to answer in a future episode of the podcast, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback and submit yours. And before I go, I just want to remind you of the tip of the week, which was about Google My Business, and just make sure that however the address in the Google My Business listing is written, that it is identical on whatever website is associated with that listing. And that'll help it rank higher in the search results. And if you're looking for people to bounce ideas off, accountability partners, mentors, or just other like-minded designers to have fun with, then you should really check out the Resourceful Designer community. We would love to see you there. To join, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/community. Well, that's it for this week. I want to thank you very much for listening. And can you do me a favor? If you enjoy the podcast, please share it with a fellow designer. And if you're so inclined, I would love to get an Apple Podcast review from you. And I've made an easy link for you to accomplish that. Just visit resourcefuldesigner.com/review, and that'll automatically take you to the podcast in Apple Podcasts where you can leave a review for the show. So thank you very much. And until next time, I am Mark DeCote, wishing you all the best with your graphic design business and reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.